For the second episode of the women's boots as good as the men's boots for any given brand that we're reviewing series, we're looking at the NYX Moc Toe compared to the men's NYX Moc Toe to see if NYX is doing the same thing a lot of these bigger brands are doing, where they're cheapening materials and construction techniques because they're women's boots, and women's boots are fast fashion and they don't wear them as much, and all these other excuses brands give consumers to justify making women's boots cheaper, maybe not cheaper, less quality for the same price, so a lower value than the men's boots. We're gonna cut them in half and see, compare the two directly, because we've got my pair of Moc Toe boots and we've got the pair that NYX sent me, to cut in half and really see what the difference is, if there is any at all. And thanks to NYX for sponsoring this video. So let's start with the leather first. So the women's boot is made from the brown Chrome XL. It's tanned by Horween, and it's about 3 millimeters thick. So the same thickness as what we've seen in the men's Heritage line. So it's made from the exact same leather. And Chrome XL is a really unique leather. It's one of my favorite leathers because it smells super good because of how many tanning compounds and conditioners and oils are infused into the leather. That's why it has such a shiny look to it, and why I think it's also jack glaze, where they really make it shiny with it's kind of cool. It's a little glass drum that they drag across the leather and it shines the leather. But also it has tons of oils and conditioners worked into it, and that's why you get almost a film on top of it that you can wipe off with your hand. It's just one of the most saturated leathers out there. And so when we burn this leather, you can see we've talked about it before, where you almost have to boil off the conditioners and oils infused into the leather before it actually starts burning. And if you look at the cross section, you can see that it's got a big slab of that grain. So it's a high quality leather, and it's the exact same leather that NYX uses in their men's boot. They haven't thinned it out in any way. It's the exact same thickness and the same standard that NYX makes their men's boots on. And we also want to do a puncture test on this leather, so we cut a little ring out of the side, put it in our testing device, and it took 144 pounds to pierce through the 3 millimeter thick Chrome XL, which is way better than the Thursday and the Origin and Wolverine, all the boots that we've done in the Medusa series. This 3 millimeter Chrome XL on the women's boots outperformed it, which is kind of cool. And then if we look at the inside of the boot, you can see that they both have that same NYX lining material. It's that yellowy split leather that lines the vamp. So same quality there. The tongue leather is the exact same. The internal sock liner is the exact same. And the stitching across the entire boot is identical. You know, you've got quadruple stitching at the vamp. You've got the same Moc Toe stitching. You've got the same double row of stitch down stitching for the construction. Everything's basically identically the same. As for the actual Moc Toe stitch itself, both of them are a single piece Moc Toe, where, if you haven't seen everything you need to know about Moc Toe boots, go check that out on the Anvil 2 channel. We go through everything you need to know about Moc Toe boots and the different toe styles. But this Moc Toe stitch doesn't sew two pieces of leather together like a more traditional Moc Toe. It's mostly decorative to give you that Moc Toe stitch look. Maybe adds a little bit of rigidity, but it's mostly for look. But it's the same on both of the boots. As for the midsoles, you can see that they both have a leather midsole. They both have a full leather heel stack. They both have the same Vibram V100 lug sole. They both have stitching all the way through the sole. They have the screws in the sole, which is something that NYX does that a lot of other brands don't do. That's super redundant and over the top, but I kind of love having screws in my boots. And we also did a puncture test on this outsole, and it took an astonishing 344 pounds to pierce through this outsole, the leather midsole, the leather insole, all the way through those layers, which was pretty crazy. And obviously, we're trying to improve the quality of tests that we're doing. And in 2023, we're planning on buying a bunch of testing equipment to really start standardizing some of these tests to give us real world information. But I still think these puncture tests give us some good information on how many layers there actually are and how much harder it is to pierce through several layers of leather compared to just fiberboard and a rubber midsole or something. And then finally to the construction, they're both a 270 stitch down construction, where that upper is flanged out or flared out and then stitched down through the midsole, through the outsole. So you see these stitchings on the welt are the same stitches on the bottom there, holding all those layers together. Same thing on the women's and the men's, and the heels are nailed down on both of these boots. And that's it. That's everything that we can know from the outside, and they're identical. There's not a single thing that's different from the women's boot compared to the men's boots so far. So let's cut them in half and see how they compare. Okay, we got them cut in half, so let's see what's inside, starting with the women's first. So looking at just the cross section of these two boots, you can see that they're built identically. You know, you've got the sock liner, you've got that full, thick, veg tan insole, you've got that leather shank, you've got the leather midsole, rubber slip sole, full leather heel stack, identical. Except for one thing, there's one difference between these two boots. My pair, of the men's pair, has this Blake Rapid stitch that locks together that insole layer to that midsole layer, sewing those together. Versus the women's pair, it doesn't have that stitch. And I think what's happened here, because it's still held together, it's still glued, you can see the nails, these clinch nails that are holding that footbed in place, but it doesn't have the stitching. And I think what they've done since I got this boot, I feel like I remember them talking about for their Heritage boots that aren't, they're really heavy work leather that's like 3.5 millimeters thick, that's the Builder Pros, it's a really work oriented boots. They quit doing that Blake Rapid stitch on the insole. So I think I'll check with Nix and slide back in and give you the right answer, but I'm pretty sure. So I reached out to Nix about the stitch or the lack thereof on the women's shoe, and they gave me a quick history of their construction and why they've omitted the stitch. So Nix was founded in 1964, and back then all their boots were hand welted with the sewing awl and the two needles, and they hand stitched the insole to the upper, and they continued to do that through the 80s. But Nix introduced the Blake stitch, or what they call the McKay lock stitch, in the 90s on their non-hand welted boots called the Contender series, and they've basically done that stitch on the inside of their boots ever since. But Nix says the McKay stitch, or that Blake stitch, has a few problems, and there's three main ones they identified. The first one is it's a blind stitch for the boot makers because they're stitching on the inside of the boot. They can't actually see what they're doing, and so it can be an inaccurate or kind of a lopsided stitch. The second thing is customers complained it caused some discomfort because you were standing on top of a stitch instead of just a flat piece of leather. And then the third thing is Nix believes the Blake stitch was always a redundant stitch, as the insole is glued to the layer underneath and the lining that wraps underneath the insole as well. So earlier this year, Nix sat down with all the boot makers, and Nix weighed the 3 points we just talked about above, and they decided it would benefit the customer by not having that stitch present on the inside of their boots. So moving forward, Nix boots, none of them will have this McKay lock stitch or this Blake stitch in their boot. They'll all have a flat piece of leather like on the women's Moc Toes. So what's my take on that? Well, to me, it's a trade-off either way. I think no matter what, that stitch still adds a little bit of structural strength, but how much will it actually affect the boot is hard to say. But glue and stitching theoretically is going to be stronger than just glue, but it comes at a cost. And that little bit of stitch around the inside costs you a little bit of comfort. This little stitch has never really bothered me personally, but I've heard people say it bothers them because you really are just standing on a stitch. And if you look at it from Nix's perspective, it makes sense, because if removing that stitch makes their boots more comfortable, easier to make, and faster to make, you can see why Nix would go with omitting that stitch. So other than that Blake Rapid stitch missing on the inside of the women's boot, they're identical. They're built to the exact same standard that the men's boots are, and which is really nice to see, because there's a lot of brands out there that, because they know they can get away with certain things with the women's brands, they know that most women are not going to be working in these boots, and like especially some of the Heritage boots, they drop the quality and keep the price the exact same. Whereas Nix is building literally the exact same boot for the women's as they are for men's. Even with like the Moc Toe and a little bit more of a casual version of their boots, it's still built to that same quality. So overall, are Nix women's boots built to the same quality that men's are? Yes, they are. They're built the exact same way, but are they worth the price? It depends on what you're doing in them and what you value, because if you want lots of leather, you want that custom footprint in there, like I started to develop in my pair. You can see like where my heel or the ball of my foot and my big toe has made an indentation, a custom fit the shape of your foot. If that's what you're looking for, they are, because it's, especially compared to some of the other made in America boots, it's crazy how much leather and how much craftsmanship gets shoved into every single one of Nix boots. So it is worth it when it comes to the quality, the durability, the manpower to make them. But also there's a lot of people out there that aren't needing every single thick layer component. And so depends on what you need the boots for, because there are different boots out there that are less money that don't have quite as many layers, but also some people really value having that more arch support and that custom footprint. So it just depends on what you value, but objectively for materials and construction, it is worth the price, and it's built to the exact same standard as the men's boots. So let me know what you guys think, and if you're in the market for a ladies boot, or if you're not the 4% of the women that watch this channel and you're a dude and your girls needing a pair of boots, you can trust the NYX women's boots to be the exact same quality. So check them out via link in my description, and let me know what other women's boots you want us to compare to the men's boots. And if you like this series, support it, because it's the only way we can justify doing them. And it is a new style of video where we're comparing the two. So if you liked it, let me know. What else would you like us to improve? And if you have a pair of the NYX women's boots, let me know your experience in them compared to a lot of the other women's work boots and how they compare and contrast, because I'm really curious. So thank you guys for everything you do. See ya.